Hi everyone, thank you for joining the webinar today. We're just going to give it a minute or two to allow everyone to join the webinar and then we will get underway. Hi everyone, we're going to give it one more minute to give everyone a chance to join the webinar and then we will get underway. Thank you for joining us today. Great, I think we can get started now. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. My name is Sahil. I'm the Key Partnerships Manager at the Big Give, in case you don't know who I am. And on the webinar today, we have Bethany, who is our Marketing and Comms Manager. And we are joined by Stuart from the FSI, who will be delivering the presentation today and answering your questions. So we're really glad that Stuart can join us again today for the webinar and delivering a great presentation again. So today's webinar is on fundraising in a tough economic climate. So obviously with the cost of living crisis and people's sort of incomes being squeezed, we really thought this would be really helpful for charities to understand how they can sort of maximize their fundraising opportunities this year. So if we go on to the next two slides, and the next one. So just a reminder that so if you didn't join us on Wednesday, I just want to quickly recap the Christmas challenge. So a reminder that the campaign starts on Giving Tuesday, which is 29th of November this year, so at midday, and closes the following Tuesday at midday, 6th of December. Please do access your Christmas Challenge dashboard to access the resources. So we'll put up all the recordings of the webinars, the slides in the webinars resource, which you can access from your Christmas Challenge dashboard. You can also access the marketing and inspirational marketing guidebooks through your dashboard as well. So please do make the most of all of the resources that we are providing. We think they can really help your campaign. And yeah, this is the time to start thinking about your marketing plans for your campaign and start putting in place all of those plans and getting ready for the campaign. And just another reminder, in case people weren't here on Wednesday, just want to quickly recap how the match funding model works for the Christmas Challenge. So you've all secured pledges for your Christmas Challenge campaign, and you may have been awarded champion funding. The donations that you receive during the Christmas Challenge are first matched by your pledges. So in this example, the first £3,000 that this charity receives in donations during the Christmas Challenge week are matched by the pledges. Once those pledges have been used up, the donations are then matched by any champion funding that you may have been awarded. So in this example, the next £3,000 of donations that the charity secures during the week are matched by the champion funds. Before we begin, I'll just go over some quick house rules. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please put them in the Q&A box in the bottom of your Zoom panel. Myself and Bethany will be picking out the questions and asking them to Stuart at the end of the webinar. If you want to introduce yourselves to other attendees, please use the chat function on the right-hand side of your Zoom panel, or if you want to share any experiences, please do put them there. Really great to have some conversations going in the chat panel there. And finally, if you want to, if you need to turn on the transcription service, that should be enabled now. So it should be available at the bottom of your Zoom panel. With that all said and done, I will now hand over to Stuart to get us underway.
Thanks very much, and it's nice to have so many of you join us. I'm pretty good at picking up questions in the chat, so do use that, and obviously we've got Sahil and Bethany picking that up as well. So just as a quick introduction to myself, I'm the CEO at the FSI. We're a small charity delivering mainly training in fundraising support, strategy development, social impact and leadership. We have an online training course, as well as we support organisations doing this type of stuff through our training packages, as well as a consultancy office. That's the end of my kind of pitch, if you like. In terms of today, we've got an hour, so we'll close at 1 o'clock. The presentation will be about 40 minutes or so long, which will give plenty of time for Q&A, and like I say, we'll pick up some of those chats as we go. In terms of social media, if you wanted to comment or connect with people that have been on this call, or directly to us at the FSI, then obviously use the hashtag, and then our Twitter feed is at the FSI. One thing I will start off with is a bit of a caveat to just dampen expectation. The title of the webinar being Fundraising in Tough Economic Times, that's a pretty tough topic in itself to cover. So my thinking when I was designing the webinar was essentially to guide you through the more technical side of what we're thinking about at the FSI when we're fundraising in tough times, what we're currently supporting organisations to do as they look at their own business model, and how they pitch themselves maybe to new audiences or to develop new offers to expand their reach and diversify their funding. So the slides are kind of deliberately technical to give you some exercises to think through. So once you get them on your email back, or you download them from the Big Give page, and do spend some time just to go through them as a bit of a guiding set of kind of frameworks there to help you think through next steps in tough economic times. So there isn't, I'm afraid, a pot of money at the end of this call, or anything like that, but hopefully some resources to help you get there. And I'll share a very just open and practical story about the FSI and how we've changed our business model in tough economic times, because we had to ensure that our own business model, we remained affordable for small charities. So training at no more than 15 or 20 pounds for a half-day session is where we're aiming to be. We can't afford to charge big memberships, so we had challenges around our core funding and how we might do that. And then we've got to support, our mission is to support the charity sector with their technical skills. So it's making sure that we can reach the really small charities that are the glue to society at the moment, and how we do that in partnership with others. So I'll tell that story in real time, and then maybe that will invite some conversations as we go. So what I will cover is just some tools for planning, developing a shared understanding of what your current social need is you're addressing, looking at your strengths and how you retain supporters and donors into your work, where you might be starting to look ahead in terms of diversification, and an acknowledgement that going back to those planning tools of what your particular strengths are as an organisation, and then the language that I'll bring in terms of the value proposition of defining and maybe redefining your audience. If you're looking for different sources of money, then you might need to be talking about your charity in a slightly different way. We'll touch upon collaborations and partnerships in discussion, and then just some top tips around proactive and reactive. It's a nice time to be talking about the latter, because you're all about to be proactive in terms of designing a campaign for the Big Give. And for those of you that were on the call on Wednesday, and for those that weren't, it's important to remember that the Big Give is a really platform for setting up other ways to raise money too, of getting your databases and contacts sorted, if you like, and then making sure that your social impact has your social media, it's well structured and expanded so you can reach more people with a new offer. going to check in on the chat. I think it's really nice. Quite a lot of people are, just sharing who they are. That's great. Lovely. Okay, lovely. So I guess the first things first is just a little bit of a kind of a group hug may be required in tough times, and that you're doing great stuff. So tough economic times are always there for small charities, and together we're resilient and confident. So do keep on doing what you're doing, and hopefully what I can talk you through is just some tools to help you think through different ways of background towards income generation. So, sorry. So in terms of what you're currently dealing with in terms of retention, I think most people on the call might have looked at a PEST or SWOT before. And I find it really interesting whenever I look at income generation. This is the first critical tool that we will do as a group session with an organisation looking at their current needs. So my first kind of top tip, if you're looking at generating income, is to go back to those tools, and we'll do an example in a second of what they are. Look at the context you're working in terms of the real world picture, the political, economic, social and tech trends that are in your world. What are the issues that are in society that you're dealing with? What are the economic challenges that society is in? And then looking more at yourself internally towards SWOT in terms of your strengths and weaknesses. What does that mean in reflection in terms of opportunities or threats? So there's an opportunity then to look at different ideas within your organisation and then align them to particular staff skills or interest, or identify where there's gaps in your staffing skill and interest, and either that's a recruitment challenge or a volunteer challenge, or it's going to line up to actually, well, we'd love to raise money in that way, but actually we don't have the skill set to do it. So actually we should stop thinking about that idea and focus on what we're good at. So I'm hoping that PEST and SWOT, for the key points of doing these exercises, is to define the main issues in your own organizational language, build belief around what your organization is dealing with, identify and map out your impact, and then a challenge to make those hard decisions about what you're going to focus on and what you might drop, so to speak. So in terms of just a practical example, I've put some just generic things that will naturally come up in some of your SWOTs, PESTs already, in terms of the political context. Some of that's very self-explanatory in terms of the central policy is shifting all the time. There's a reduction in core funding, but then the local political context and the community buy-in is also going to be important, and that can be a positive or a negative. It doesn't all have to be doom and gloom, but it probably will be at the moment given everything that's happening. And there'll be some policy drivers that are then influencing the economic factors. So for those of you that have done PEST before, you'll be very familiar with this type of language of unpicking the different things that come up as a result of a policy thing. Might be that there's an increased cost of delivery, for example. We know there's an increased cost of living, and then that's having an effect in society, going down to the bottom around a cost of living crisis and effects of poverty. So it might be that then that starts to signify that you need to collect evidence of what that demand is for you to then apply for more money or support. It might be that you're noticing different health effects when you reflect and say, well, actually X is happening in terms of poverty, but that's having a mental health effect. Actually, that's having an economic effect too. So just mapping that out as much as you can. So this is really a kind of a group brainstorming exercise. And then thinking about the technological challenges. We've all seen a shift towards digital service provision, or demands to do so, obviously with the pandemic, but we're also seeing different services appear in terms of then people connecting online and engaging in a different way, which again might start prompting different thoughts or opportunities to diversify some of your products, or to develop new products that support some of your core activity, bearing in mind that that in itself might lead to increased competition or the increased ability to match that demand. So hopefully that's kind of self-explanatory. So this is the context. So any funder or supporter is going to want to hear about your particular definition of what bits of these issues you're addressing as an organisation. That's the key thing. So having these conversations within an organisation, you'll be very clear then is everybody on the same page, basically, or will this exercise help get people on the same page? So in tough economic times, you need to be really focused on your key message and what you're trying to achieve in terms of your impact model. And we'll touch upon different ways of unpicking the impact bit as we go along this slides. Moving on to the SWOT. So this is the top bits here are really the internal factors in terms of you might have or you might describe yourself as actually what's really great about our small charity is we're locally embedded, we're trusted, we've got a proven track record, we've got the skills to deliver on those challenges, we've got a good volunteer and donor base, and our engagements recently increased. So the challenges we have around wages or the skill set is there, but we've got these strengths to build on. So that may lead to different opportunities to look at ways in which we can expand in terms of helping people. So my bullet points are just examples, just to nudge it along the way. So if I reflect back on the PEST for FSI when I arrived December last year, it was quite clear that infrastructure funding was going to be a real challenge. Society-wise, there's an increased demand for our services. And economic-wise, when we map out who's paying what's popular, we know that bite-sized training of an hour and a half or a half day is getting more popular in terms of people accessing it. But most people wanted to fund and take part in a full-day training. So online, that's really hard from a technological point of view to keep people engaged. So what can we do to do day training but break it up as much as we can, or offer again, now we're back in person, can we do more in person workshops? Fundamentally, if that's not scalable, actually what are we going to do to address the challenge of reaching more people but keeping it affordable? So then as a team we can sit and say, well, actually what we know we're really good at is of our 9,000 members, we know that 1,000 or 2,000 of them are really heavily engaged in what we do, but they don't buy training every month, but they'd like to if they could. So could we offer a different type of service with different offer included? So we're moving towards an earned subscription model, so people will pay monthly to access FSI services, and then for £20 a month they'll be able to access all of our training whenever they want to, which is very different than a standalone training offer. And it means that we have to up our tech game in terms of our ability to manage a subscription package. So I'll talk a bit more about that later on as we move towards a different value proposition for our customers. So hopefully this has got you thinking in terms of the context you're working in, but also your own internal position that you're in as you map out your strengths, weaknesses, opportunity and threat. So if we go back to the strengths bit internal, we've got the 5 points mapped out there. So what that might translate to then is in terms of opportunities or different ways to start to work with people that are currently engaged in your work. So in terms of the topic like retention, or how do you keep people within your network, those strengths play out in different ways. So if you've got a locally embedded and trusted team, then you need to be telling the stories. Your media reputation is going to be great, but have people heard about you? Is there stories that build on that proven track record and impact that you can give to the media? A check-in, do you have the staff skills, or can you bring in a volunteer to help with your social media or your press releases to tell people about your story? Particularly relevant as you're building existing networks for the Big Give campaign, is to get those stories out, to get people really resonating with what your mission is, and then for that increased engagement in terms of starting to mobilize networks. And obviously we talked a lot about that on Wednesday in terms of mapping out what those networks are, how you keep the existing people is where you would start to spread the message from, and the different roles they play in terms of your finance and your income generation. So mapping out your existing networks based on that exercise, then you should be able to then create lists of existing donors if you're lucky enough to have regular ones or major ones, existing fundraisers of people that are working with you, existing relationships within trusts, corporate relationships, statutory ones, and then making sure does that align with the issues that came up when you were discussing in PEST in terms of the audience you're trying to reach from a policy perspective or a funding perspective, and then have you got the internal staff teams and the organisation to make sure that those particular contact lists are up to date and relevant based on what your current pitch is going to be. So underpinning the first step in fundraising in tough economic times is to actually go from a place of strength, spend some time as a team, mapping out the context, the social need, what you're doing about it, and who's currently supporting you, and send that communication out to those existing contacts to remind them who you are. So you're not asking for anything there, but you're putting the stories on people's front of their minds and setting yourself up for the campaign, but also setting yourself up for future fundraising activities. And some of those, surprise, like the idea around retention or what you might send to them is thinking through, well, if I've got an existing set of supporters that I want to start to mobilize, whether that's for the Big Give campaign or whether that's just because you need to do a fundraising campaign around social mission, what's going to just be a nice surprise for people that are in that existing list of people that are on there. So it might be as simple as just a personalized card from the chair of the board or the CEO, or it might be that you send them a little story card of the work that you've done to inspire them to re-engage or to sign up for a particular mailing list or particular event that you've got coming up, and personalizing that. So you don't have to be dramatic in the gifts or whatever, but just making that connection again real, just to remind people who you are. Again, you're not only just thanking people for being involved, but you're being strategic here and saying, well, what is that the message that's going to respond given the context that people are in now, and how can we portray that in a brief surprise with one of our retention goals, if you like. And then it might be that you give yourself a challenge to say, well, how do we test that people are coming back to us in some way? So is there an online event, or is there an in-person campaign that you can invite people to just to say thank you as well? So just things to consider as you're looking to retain the crowd. So I wanted just very briefly, this isn't an impact session, but naturally as part of you telling the story, there's going to be or need to be conversations around the different models of mapping the impact. So what I wanted to lay out is just and get people familiar with the terms, and I'm sure many of you are, in terms of outputs and outcomes and what changes. So I just thought there's some really useful, very simple tools then for you to help articulate that, and to then express the difference between what you do in terms of activities. So at the bottom there, we've just got a very simple example of a pet training, pet wellbeing charity that training for pet owners, or subsidised pet care is the activity, but the impact of what if you like, the why you exist question, or what's going to get donors involved, is the top level impact in terms of healthier dogs. And then to get there, you're in the intermediary outcomes. It's a bit technical, kind of geeky language, but it's the building blocks of a fundraising campaign. It's not to be talking to your donors or prospective people that you want to engage with in terms of your activities, but you want to be talking to them and showing them the evidence of the impact bit at the top. So whether you use the planning triangle to articulate that internally is one thing. Different methods might be that you do that just as a same layout, but going from left to right rather than in the triangle form. So you'll see the same things laid out there. This is a bit more explicit in terms of outputs, in terms of numbers of people that have done that. Might be really important to underpinning a big give campaign, because you might want to say, actually, this is where we're at now, and our aim is to expand the outputs by X, Y, Z. And then we're conscious that by doing so, we'll be able then to increase our outcomes and impact, and therefore that's our story of where we need funding, because we want to be able to deliver more of what we do, and we can evidence that by doing certain things we're creating that impact, and then we can share the stories to our the people we want to influence through the impact. Again, I don't want to be too technical. I just want to kind of remind you of different options available then of mapping outcomes out. So my crib sheet when I'm writing this up is to really ask myself, can I define as an organization can I answer 3 critical questions? So the impact question is the why question. So what's our value proposition? Why do we exist? Who to? So most charities will describe their who as their beneficiaries. In fundraising terms, that's different. There are different trusts and foundations. There's different statutory organisations. There's corporate donors. There's people within corporates that you might want to influence, etc., etc. So your pitch or your description of why to them might be quite different depending on what's going to resonate with them. So a really simple way to help get you ready for fundraising campaigns is to just kind of complete these boxes and think of it as an impact map. So the orange arrows at the bottom is to say, well, actually, you know, in terms of what we do, in terms of the service we're delivering, that's the outputs, X of this is happening, and Y if this is happening. So, but then that goes back to why and we exist, i.e. the impact we're making, and then hopefully that translates to a number of people that are involved in a number and targets around your fundraising in terms of who. So this is my my little crib sheet that I fill in if I'm wanting to chat to a particular person. I'll be thinking what's going to resonate with them from my offer, rather than just say these are the charitable activities that the FSI do, because for example, we've recently raised some money for a corporate sponsor who actually want us to do a matching service from their staff to the charities that we support in terms of the technical skills. So they will pay us to essentially create volunteering opportunities. So they're less interested in the skills and knowledge and what changes in the charities, but more interested in the personal development of their staff by helping out the people that are working in small charities for us. So it's a very different impact proposition to consider. And one that's interesting for me as I look to diversify our range of corporate sponsors, then it's a very practical shift in what we're trying to achieve. So I guess the third point and topic 3, just to recognise, is the word about diversification. So if you will have, through your PEST and SWOT, been able to start to talk about the different strengths of the organisation and where money is coming from, the relationships that you might have with certain trusts and foundations, or the relationship you have with statutory organisations or contracts for your service delivery. And then within the opportunities map, there's different ideas that might have come up around different types of earned income. It might be that you want to attract more individual donors in, or different types of unrestricted income to take the pressure off the trusts and foundations, which is obviously much more competitive process than before. So it's firstly acknowledging where do you want those different income sources to come from, and then checking in so what activities do we then need to do to generate X, Y, Z. So it might be that you need to develop a new product. It might be that you need to expand a service, but you're telling your stories to different corporates to get them involved or engaged in your story. It might be that you're actually thinking, what's a brand new trading activity that we can have, which then just gives money into the charity, but it's not directly connected to the charity. So acknowledging the shift that you want to make then is the important outcome for them being able to track, well, how do we get there? And so there's different things to consider there in terms of like regular giving or earned income, different asks that you might have if you're talking to trusts and foundations or corporates. And actually there's a role that a lot of charities can play in helping corporates achieve their social responsibility point. I guess going back to the FSI example, we consciously made the decision not to do any statutory fundraising. We saw that as not a skill set we had within the staff team. We have it in our associate pool, but not in the staff team. And we wanted, our challenge, is, if you remember, in terms of our weakness, was the regular nature of people paying for training for us. How do we make that happen? So instead of regular giving as a regular donor, we had the conversation around creating regular subscribers, as I mentioned, and then £20 a month feels like a nice price point to land on. So our focus groups with small charities reaffirm that's a decent price point. And then we starting to pitch to different trusts and foundations about the model that we've got in terms of we want to be the, if you like, the Netflix or Now TV of the charity world, and that we're a platform that people can host the best training from, but it wouldn't always need to be FSI created training. So we're creating a slightly different sense of community around the training, where we quality audit people, and we're setting ourselves up with different conversations with corporates that might want to sponsor the platform, because our engagement with small charities should be more regular. So in our diversification shift, we've said we want 10 to 15% of our income coming from subscription, and then that should have a lead or a consequence of raising 50 to 70 grand more in corporate sponsorship. And between that and in partnership with others, we will apply to have some of the reach that has in terms of the advice then we can offer is a lot broader, funded by different trusts and foundations who want to help particular cause areas. So can we run training programs around cause rather than the technical skill, just to paint an example of how those points kind of can play through as an organization. Okay, if you were on the session on Wednesday, you'll certainly remember my conversation around value proposition, and I think I invited people to put in the chat box the different their current value proposition in terms of how would they describe their why based on the different audiences that they wanting to reach in their new aspirational fundraising model. So what's the pitch that you would make to a statutory authority? Well, that will typically be maybe improved outcomes on a particular service. So it might be an education that you're getting young people to attend class more, or they're less disruptive in class, less exclusions on the school, for example. Or for NHS, it might be simple that it's an early intervention that's going to save money, and we can engage with a particular community and reach them in a way that other organisations can't, because they're not as locally connected or embedded. That'll be then, or could be, very different to then your value proposition or describing your why to new donors or corporates, because the corporates would want you to have kind of read or looked at their social responsibility or their mission in terms of their charitable work and then line it up accordingly. And same for new donors that you're telling the story. What story are you telling them around the impact that you've changed or want to change if you're expanding a service or looking for different sources of income to replace other funds? Is telling the story of what you've achieved so far, and that how that story resonates with that particular donor. So if it's an individual, you'll be wanting to hear from them what their interest area is at a personal level, rather than just assume if they're rich they're going to give you money, if you like, on a particular cause, and just thinking through practically what's going to hook them in, so to speak. So the art of the going back to excuse me, my slide has stopped. There we go. Going back to my map around the why and the who. That who then is, you may have moved from having 2 people to describe your work, 2 or 2 groups of people, to 4 or 5 people that you're talking to in slightly different ways, and being able to train and support your team to speak to those groups in different ways while you're still sitting under the common impact goal is really important for diversifying fundraising, because then you'll start to be able to test what works or doesn't work with different people based on different language you're using. So hopefully this kind of quite simple little crib sheet, these 4 boxes, just help you start to think that through in terms of, well, how we've got a core set of services in the what, the why, and the who is what's going to shift a bit here, and then how am I going to help my team or others to describe my work to new people that haven't heard of us before. So removing all the assumptions of what you might think people think about you, is just testing that through. Okay, we're just coming up to the final bit of my chat, and then we'll open it up for Q&A, because I think there's going to be a lot of value of just collecting thoughts or questions, and I'm just hearing if the kind of people have got these building blocks in place with their organisation. So my final bit around collaboration and partnerships is hopefully fairly self-explanatory. Once you've mapped out the context you're working in and identified the impact you're having, your next challenge would be to communicate or to think about who else shares that common vision, mission, values around that social need that you're addressing. So are there other organisations that we've shared stories or similar beneficiaries? And how do you get away from thinking actually they're going to compete for funding and services from us, in terms of actually, can we shift them to be a collaborator? So can we do one thing in a clearly defined way that supports them and vice versa? And is there an opportunity to share fundraising goals or resources to save yourself time? So our practical example of that at the FSI is our recent partnership with NCVO, as we took over the legacy services from Small Charity Coalition, and that we jointly deliver a helpline. So we've each had our own helpline before, our own training resources, and on the face of it, you'd think NCVO and us were competitors, and actually we sat down and said there's a joint endeavour here. One is to make that helpline more efficient and have it as a one-stop shop. That's been done. We've staffed that up and we've raised some trust funding to keep that going. Great. Actually, what's bigger than that is the ability for us then to reach small organisations. As a very small charity ourselves, then we can add a lot of value to NCVO's mission to acknowledge that most of their members are small, but just not quite as small as ours. So actually, by helping the very small, can we share data and help people move up, so that as they grow, they might get more training, offer and support from NCVO rather than us, in terms of more advanced training materials for a different scale of charity. And how do we share membership data with suitable permissions, obviously, to share about our joint mission of the fact that infrastructure is critical to fund. So by coming together, we can present the challenge back to funders and to government to say, this needs funding. Together we want to do it to make it more efficient, so we haven't got lots of on costs at the top, and then starting to present that offer collectively, so we share fundraising resources now, i.e. we do bids together, we think about the different tenders that we might go for. That's more NCVO, so they might lead them and we come in as a partner, and then there might be more direct funder relationships that we can develop with people, but we can show that our reach is bigger because we're working together. So just as a very practical example of thinking through, like these are tough times. I don't think we couldn't do the scale of fundraising that is our ambition with NCVO without them. We just couldn't be able to handle the amount of bids and stuff that we'd have to do to survive that. But then likewise, they wouldn't be able to put a subscription package in so quickly because we were a bit more nimble and smaller on them. But then can those subscribers become then members of NCVO in due course? So we suitably help each other out. And then the points around proactive and reactive, you can see just from that example really is being proactive is forming the vision of what you might want to achieve, whether that's subscription or a joint offer. And then we've spent a lot of time between our staff teams in different workshops, making sure that collaboration is there and it's built around a common vision, but it also achieves the goals around, let's do the opportunity mapping together and then cut the costs that it takes to fundraise. So we're not each building up a fundraising offer, but we're saying particularly just, for the advice line and for the training support offer, that's very much a common goal. Okay, so that's the end of the formal presentation. Hopefully that was all helpful. What worked really well on Wednesday was, well, so doing a quick reminder of next steps, but also just opening the floor to questions. So if people have got things on their mind, or if they want to say, what the heck were you talking about with value propositions, then hopefully I can help unpack it.
Thank you, Stuart. That was really interesting and hopefully really helpful for the charities, how they can get those building blocks in place for their campaign and some of those tips that you shared with them. So really thank you for delivering another great presentation. We have had some questions, so I think we'll start there. Firstly, we had a question from Penny from Include Project. So she asked, to help engage individual donors by being transparent, do you know of any good shareable content, for example, short videos, etc., that helped demystify how smaller charities tend to be funded, in the hope that this helps to illustrate why individual giving is still so important and has a real impact?
Gosh, I'm not sure I do. In terms of good shareable content, I don't know, maybe that's one for the others on the call if they've got materials. I mean, I was with Dandelion Project yesterday, helping them out with some of their fundraising challenges. And I know Kate from Dandelion's on the call, so I know they've got some fantastic short videos coming up. They've got a package of them that they're rolling out. So actually, the help might be in the room rather than through me. Sorry.
Yeah, we do encourage, if you want to share details, that's a really great way as well to learn from other charities. And
sorry, I couldn't answer the question directly.
That's okay. And just a reminder, we do have actually the Ask the Panel webinar next Friday. So we'll have some of the award winners from last year sharing their experiences as well. So just a reminder of that as well, if you want to ask other charities their sort of experiences and tips.
I mean, I've seen in the case studies that we shared on Wednesday, there was a lot of kind of vox pop style commentary and narratives within that. I didn't see the video because it was just PDFs that were there. So it'd be really interesting from that panel to hear from them what worked in terms of the short videos.
Great. So I think Beth, I think you picked up a couple of questions, haven't you?
Yeah, there's one from Fiona, and she says, can you expand on need to diversify away from trusts and foundations? So have you had any stats on typical success rates, i.e. how oversubscribed are their funding rounds since the pandemic?
I mean, some data comes from charity aid foundations, donor mapping. On individual donors, we know there's been a 10% reduction from individuals donating to charities this year. At a grant and trust level, it really ranges from different trusts, but the common thing is that it's maybe at least doubled in terms of demand that's there. The unfortunate effect that's also happening is some of the trusts and foundation pots are built on pension income and endowments. So we're seeing a reduction in the current value of that, which will play through into some of the decisions, particularly for next year, around the amount of money that they give up. So give out, sorry. And so we can expect some kind of narrowing of some of the bigger trusts. It's going to be interesting to see what the lottery do with their new strategy around it, because in theory they've still got a different pot because it was invested differently. So, but they're going to be super busy. Inundated, I think would be the right language. My take in terms of success rates or bid writing is, if you're hitting 20 to 30%, you're doing really, really well. So there's an awful lot of no's that are going to come at you in terms of that 80%, but actually 20% is pretty good. I guess the balance is always proportional to your organisation. So what trusts and foundations are worth doing. The best way to raise money as ever is to try and build relationships with grant managers, and that takes a long time, and you obviously have to be aware of conflicts of interest. But getting to know a charity and what their preferences are from the cause perspective, or how they interpret their effects on the cause and what they want you to do is vital. That's the key bit. And if a campaign such as Big Give helps you get your name known, then that can be a first door opener. So you might use that as a tactic to some of the hit list of the people you want to influence, in terms of letting them know about the campaign, not asking them for money, but just letting them know about your work and the impact you're achieving, and telling that why story to them as eloquently as you can.
Great. We did have another good question as well, was given that we're living in tough economic times, what sort of language would you use so that you don't come across as tone deaf? And I guess this sort of comes into how soft should the ask be, like when you are going out and making those asks, how soft should they be, or how?
Well, I mean, my take on it, there's twofold on that. Obviously, you have to paint the realistic picture of social need, and it's thoroughly depressing out there at the moment in terms of communities that are really struggling. So the most relevant data you can have on who benefits from your service in terms of what position they're in, demographics are obviously important, as well as the economic side. I guess I'd just probably flip it a little bit, because the assumption that's in that is that that's either a trust foundation bid to help X, Y, Z people in the community, or it's a call for an individual to give some money to. And I'm of the mindset that a lot of people give for the positive story, i.e. the story of change that your charity is delivering. So as kind of crass as it might sound, and if we're in the game of fundraising, if you're talking about the difference that you're having on people's lives, for me, that's the compelling why, rather than, so you acknowledge the social need, obviously in terms of the strategy and what underpins it, but you're talking about the why in a different, more positive way, particularly if you're, so obviously some trusts and foundations want that evidence base. I'm not passing that through, but if you're trying to get other types of donors in, they might be inspired by a positive story about the difference you've made to people's lives, because ultimately that's why people will give you money. It's not to keep people in poverty, it's to change their life. The other side, I would say, is if you're looking at diversifying income, you don't have to tell stories of the need all the time, because it might be that you're developing products and services for people. So for example, I work with the Bromley by Bow Centre in East London. They particularly serve a really poor area of Tower Hamlets, and they're really good at accessing services to women, particularly women that are living in multiple deprivation. But their other success is how else, well, their other challenge is how else we do fantastic health services. So for example, one is a pottery class. Actually, there's an awful lot of people in London with money to spend on a pottery class, and would they fund and support us for them running a pottery class, and then we can subsidise it to others, but they don't have to know that subsidised been in place, so to speak. It's just a different way of making the economics work. But your pitch then isn't, I'm helping poor people, it's simply come to an excellent pottery class. I know I'm being a bit crass, and excuse any language there, I don't mean it in a crass way, but I'm just trying to paint a different picture.
And I think as well for this campaign is that the donations are being doubled. So that is a big sort of thing to lead with, that whatever people can give, it can go twice as far by donating during the Christmas challenge. So that's something that you shouldn't forget in your messaging when you're going out there for the asks. Do you have a question, I think?
Yeah, there's one from Laura. She says, given that we are living in tough economic times, what sort of language would you use?
So that was the one, I think that was the one just asked before. I think
okay.
The next one was about motivating your organization. So how do you motivate your organization to support you in your fundraising effort? Are you expanding your network?
Well, hopefully my staff team are suitably motivated. In terms of, it's always about getting back, it's always about the impact story. That's the fundamental bit. It's the reason people work for you. It's the reason people stay with you. It's the stories of what difference you've made. So the inspiration that always comes from collecting stories, vox pops from people that have been through the service, getting them involved, ideally in future service design. Even you can take it one step further, and if it's appropriate, obviously, of getting people that have been through your services, ambassadors and fundraisers for you. That's hugely motivating for the staff team to see people come back, and then also they're willing, they're trying to fundraise for the cause to widen the scope of it. But fundamentally, it always comes back to that why question. So if you design the why you exist bit, the evidence then is in the stories of the people that benefit, and whether you have them stuck around the wall or whether on social media or on your website, whichever vehicle you choose, and it might be a few of them, then just making sure as a staff team there's some time spent talking them through and designing them together, because that's the motivating bit is the storytelling. So I'd invest, well, as I try to, if possible, invest some time just in a simple group team storytelling session, just to acknowledge that, that's what it's all about, as well as just looking after people.
And on that note is, how many people should be involved when you're doing these PEST and SWOT analysis? Is there a case of too many people getting involved, etc.?
If you're a big organisation or you've got lots and lots of volunteers, maybe lots of people connected, maybe a sample of them, but I always say more the merrier. So you can always do a starter SWOT with a few beneficiaries or team members, or have conversations with people just to start populating it beforehand and then do it. But the value of lots of impact is fascinating, because the language people use to describe the situation they're in is always fascinating, and it differs really interestingly, depends on who's said it for obvious reasons. So if you're the services, you're going to have a very different impression maybe of what the economic context is in, but sitting next to someone that's in a different position is a kind of fascinating learning for an organisation, especially if you're designing new stuff in that opportunities side of things. Yeah.
Right. I think
10 to 15 as the one group is the maximum in one session, as I see it. More than that, it's going to be a very long day.
And I think on that as well, it's really, when you're sort of creating your message to go out to chat to donors, it's sometimes really useful to get your beneficiaries involved and also sort of your existing supporters, and just asking them, why do you donate to us? What's worked for you when we've gone out to you, and what have you resonated with? So getting beneficiaries and donors involved in that messaging can be really helpful. And how do you go about reapproaching existing donors who have supported you in the past but not too long ago? So those lapsed donors, do you have any advice there?
I think some of it was in the retention bits that we mentioned, which was send them something nice, surprise them, don't ask them for cash, just thank them and acknowledge that they've helped you out. And that touch point, I think it's a fundamental that a lot of people kind of forget, or they just do it at Christmas card, corporate Christmas card time, and actually just spending a bit of time doing a personalized postcard or creating something that you can send to people. If you haven't got much cash, there's ways of doing that. It might even be the virtual one's not as good, but it might be that's more cost efficient than lots of posts or whatever. But a nudge, and if there's certain key people that have given, it might be that you know of a few that have given over a certain amount, you might want to send them a gift that's a bit more appropriate to that, just to send them flowers. I thought there was some really nice examples during the pandemic of people using the delivery services or stuff to send a group of beneficiaries or donors like an afternoon tea or something, which sounds really silly, but it's a heck of a way to keep you on their radar without asking for cash. The key bit is not stop, ask for cash very delicately and not that often. And you want to be really specific about what you're asking for and when and who, otherwise you'll just bore people with an ask for money.
And when you're going out to those lapsed donors, if you have like the date on when they last gave you or the support they gave to you, that's try and personalize that message as much as possible, and because it shows how you're sort of really reaching out to them.
Yeah, and there's nothing like a handwritten note from chair of the board or CEO or someone. That goes a long way. Which reminds me, I should start writing more personalized notes.
Yeah, that's always a nice thing to receive, a personalized note. I think we're done with the questions. Can't see any more questions. So I think I'll just wrap up here, and firstly, just say to remind everyone, we do have 3 webinars next week. So we have 2 social media webinars, one on Monday focusing for beginners. So if you're a small charity or first time taking part in the Big Give Christmas Challenge, that will be really useful to you to get to know how to sort of start your social media campaign and get the basics right. And then we have one on Wednesday, more advanced users, so more going into more details, things like using ads, etc. So those are both going to be hosted by Lightful, who we've worked with before and give great insights into social media. So you can sign up for them again from the webinars resources. And as I mentioned before, we have the Ask the Panel webinar next Friday, so you can ask the charities that took part last year your questions, and they'll share their experiences. I did see a question about how, so I think it was from Laura, about how sort of charities can get together and sort of share their experiences, tips, plans. I will take that as a way, and maybe we can think about trying to set up a Discord or a Slack group for charities to sort of collaborate and share ideas and opinions with. So I will take that advice away and see what we can come up with there.
A lot of charities use a fundraising chat on Facebook. Yeah. So if you're not on that already, you might want to use that, but potentially we could look into setting up a Big Give specific Facebook group for you guys to all get involved in as well, potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we'll take that as sort of feedback away, and we'll look into that and be in touch. I want to thank Stuart again for delivering a great presentation today and on Wednesday. So thank you for taking your time out of your busy day to be with us and share your advice with all of us today. I know I've learned a lot today. Thank you to all the attendees for joining us today, for contributing, asking questions, and engaging with us. And yeah, we hope you've learned something today, and hope you have a great weekend. Thank you, everyone.
We see you all. Thank you.
Bye.